Today, on Yak About Today, it's all about Thanksgiving.
What's up, everybody? I'm Stephanie Raffelock.
And I'm David Yakir.
And you're listening to Yak About Today, the ongoing, never-ending conversation between two best friends, sharing insights, perspectives, and plenty of opinion. So get comfy, turn up the volume, and listen to what we yak about today. Hey, David.
Hey,
Happy
Stephanie.
Thanksgiving.
Oh, I was going to say it first. Happy Thanksgiving to you.
I beat you to it.
So, I realized we had been talking about doing a Thanksgiving show. In fact, I think we were talking about it last January, it seems, that we were going to do Thanksgiving and Christmas. So, we decided we were going to have a couple of conversations, like the best, the worst, the tragic, all that. And we were going to tell our stories. But, I kept thinking that I knew what Thanksgiving, where it came from, and mostly right. So I don't know if a lot of people know, and they certainly don't know one aspect of it. And, of course, this is it's a national holiday of thanks for us, the U.S., Canada, and Brazil.
Oh.
Of all places.
Who knew?
Okay. And apparently, it came from, the pilgrims celebrating their harvest, and the blessings. They were saying thanks in general for the last year. But it was modeled supposedly. Remember, everything is folklore here. It was modeled after a 1621 harvest that the English colonists who were living in Plymouth at the time sat down with the Wampanoag people, and they shared food because the Wampanoag people were also thankful that they had a good year and the pilgrims had a good year. So they got together and they shared a feast. And that's before, let's just say they didn't get along later.
Right.
So that's it. So it's got this big thing, and it's assumed that they had turkey and they made bread stuffing and they had potatoes and cranberries and pumpkin and all that. We don't know. That may have come later when people started having turkey and pumpkin and cranberries and said, oh, this must have been what they had before. So that's basically, our mythology about Thanksgiving. But if you go further back, it was during Henry VIII's reign. And there was, now, don't hold me to the exact memory of this, but apparently between the Catholic Church and I believe the New Protestant Church, everybody was having duplicate holidays. So there were all these dozens and dozens of holidays, and they decided to sort of consolidate a lot of the church holidays. And in the consolidation, they had holidays where they all gave thanks. So that could be what the pilgrims had in mind, because I guess Henry VIII only lived, 100, 150 years before them, so it was relatively recent. So that's a little history. I think it's a history. Either that or it gave me something to talk about for the opening of the show.
Well, I certainly didn't know the Henry piece. And, I suspect that wild turkey was part of the feast in that original Thanksgiving. In that part of the country, there's a lot of wild turkeys.
That's
you can
right.
see them a lot. If you're on the Merrick Parkway, which I think is between Connecticut and New York, you would know better than I.
I do it.
But I remember driving that parkway one fall and seeing all these wild turkeys. And I said to my husband, look at all these wild turkeys. And he goes, those have to be somebody's pets. No, there's too many. And we've now gone 3 miles and we've seen, 30 wild turkeys. So,
yeah.
And I had wild turkey one year for Thanksgiving.
Is it very gamey? I heard it's a little tougher.
It was a little gamey, and it was like the breast meat was dark. Like it was all dark because these turkeys exercise more than a store-bought turkey does not exercise much. So it gets, a little top heavy, and
that's right. It's
not the same.
It's the muscle hasn't been developed, and muscle is hard versus all that. Before we do get into, how we're going to handle Thanksgiving, I thought because it's now that I started listening to and looking up what the CDC guidelines were. about Thanksgiving, and not that we should preach it because you're hearing it on TV nonstop, but it affects how I'm thinking about Thanksgiving and keeping our distance and wearing masks and trying to keep it down to so few people. And if you can, just don't travel and get together on Zoom, which is a great idea for you and I to have Thanksgiving together, because we could have a Zoom Thanksgiving. That would be very nice. So I thought I'd just bring it up because I was talking to, there's a guy who does the extermination of the property. He owns a nice sized company. And he was telling me that they don't know what to do because there's his parents and his uncles and aunts and her parents and her uncles and aunts, and they all live in the same town. So it's expected that they're all getting together, and they don't know what to do. There's like this fear factor on some of them. Some of them are sitting there going, really? We're not going to get sick. It's just us type of thing. But I don't know how people are handling it. What are you doing? I mean, how are you doing it? Or are we going to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, we could talk about that. My husband and I have not had close family ties for a number of years, and we're both kind of orphans at this point. Our parents are long gone. So we've had a lot of Thanksgivings in our relationship where it was just the two of us. And so in a certain way, this year is no different. Now, originally we had one of Dean's nephews coming out to spend the holidays with it, and we thought better of it because of the air travel, because of, he's a young man, and he's a young man that could carry the virus without really having symptoms. So we thought better of it, and we developed new traditions throughout our marriage that don't look like a traditional Thanksgiving. They're our traditions, but they're not it's not the kind of thing you find in Home and Garden television or Home and Garden magazine. It's different. So it's just the two of us. And our new tradition is, and has been, that I buy turkey thighs and I make turkey soup out of them, and I let it slow cook all day in the cooker. And while it's simmering, Dean and I go out and we do a heavy duty hike, like 3 to 5 miles. We're gone usually a couple of hours. This year, we're going to hike through an area that goes on the bluffs above the lake, above Lake Austin. And then we come back and we eat our turkey soup, and I make a pumpkin custard, which is divine.
I love that.
Indulge in turkey soup and pumpkin custard, and that's pretty much our holiday.
The custard thing, can you pack it nice and send it to me overnight? FedEx overnight.
Custard. I'm afraid it would fall by the time it got to you.
Oh, that's true. I thought Billy should start tasting, some of the food that you cook, so here we go. So I was thinking about some of the questions you asked. And I think the first question, it's sort of, I hadn't thought of it. It's a simple question, but I had not really thought about it. I think that first question and the last question I had never really thought about. But you asked, what's special about Thanksgiving? And I started to write something, about family, and I don't know what I was writing. And then I had sort of a really crazy thought. It was really talking with some of the friends and some of the neighbors who they were sitting there going, thank God this thing is happening. I don't have to go. We don't have to get together. We don't have to scream. And I thought about it because that's actually the benefit of Thanksgiving. The fact is, it forces you to go. It does. And, it's like Christmas. I mean, the two of them are very, very similar in the fact that we're all sitting around the table. We don't want to sit around the table. Half the people we say we don't like. But if you have kids, they love it because they all get to run around crazy. But if you ask the same people who go, I don't really want to go, and you ask them about Thanksgiving, they'll sit there and they say how great it was to see your family. So it's in retrospect and the fond memories you have that I think is funny. That's what's special about Thanksgiving. So I don't want to go, oh, remember when? It was so great. It's that type of thing. So I thought that was what I thought was special.
Well, you were talking about mythology earlier, and it's kind of like we build our own mythology on the memories of the holiday. And of course, memories change. They're never accurate.
That's right.
I mean, a newspaper reporter can't get the facts right from Wednesday to Friday. So, we can't be expected to get the facts straight about Thanksgiving from Thursday to Friday.
Right.
So there is kind of a new mythology. Here's what I remember was special about Thanksgiving, and I think about it every year. I was in kindergarten, and they had the teacher had us put our hand on a piece of paper and trace around our hand. So you've got, the thumb and all the fingers, and then you connect the fingers so it looks like the fan of a turkey, and the thumb becomes the head of a turkey, and you draw a couple of legs on it. Well, I never forgot that because nobody ever taught me how to draw anything. So for the next year, throughout the rest of my kindergarten experience, all I drew were turkeys. And finally, somewhere in the spring, somebody said, Stephanie, you have to try to draw something other than a turkey. But I remember that turkey fondly every year. And that's what's special about Thanksgiving.
Do you still
draw particular turkey?
Do you still draw the turkey?
Every now and then.
In between writing manuscripts and books, you just sit and draw turkeys.
I sit and draw turkeys.
Right. When we go video in our future podcast, you'll have to paste all your artwork, on the refrigerator or on the wall so we can all see it.
Listen, that turkey was special because I am a terrible artist. I can't render anything. Even at 68 years old, it's like my drawings look like they were done by a 4-year-old.
Yeah. So down our list, I have these all in the wrong order. I mean, I was going by our list when I was thinking about them because I should have thought about it. There's a natural order to this. So I was going to do my favorite, but I think I'm going to do my funniest because that's an early one. Because, I'll just take you through it. So I don't remember Thanksgiving growing up at all. And I think that's because we were a first generation Jewish family. I mean, my grandparents, came over. And so a lot of ghetto type immigrants like we would spend all our time with the family on the weekends. Yes, my father worked during the week, 9 to 5, and I went to school, and my mother was a homemaker. But on the weekends, we got dressed, and it was going to the grandparents, both Saturday and Sunday, whereas my 6 uncles and aunts on one side and the 6 uncles and aunts on the other side, and all my cousins, we would all gather, and it would always be around the kitchen table. So we were always eating. So I'm not sure if we actually had Thanksgiving. And I kept trying to place it, and all I can remember is us sitting around the table and eating. So I asked the cousin, so I have to get through this. So I asked the cousin of mine if she remembers having Thanksgiving. And her response was, "Cuz, don't you remember the ham fiasco?" And something started coming back in my mind. So let me give you the setup for this. So we're very young. We're a kosher family. The grandparents were especially religious. We all went to shul, which is our Yiddish word for temple, as you know, because you're married to a Jew. And at a dinner, my aunts and uncles apparently invited their neighbors who weren't Jewish, and they brought a ham. So, as you know, kosher means no pork or ham. So they placed it on the table, which was a long folding table that people have when the whole family gets together, and my bubby, which is my grandmother, didn't see it at first. But when she sat down and she noticed it, she asked, "What was that?" And the kindly neighbor said, "We brought a ham." Total chaos pursued. And if I remember correctly, right, she decided that the ham infected all the food on the table. So she started tossing out all the food off the table.
Gosh.
And these are, this is a generation that you didn't waste food. You had to eat it, And my cousin tells me, so what happened is they were so upset, they went to temple, and all the aunts and uncles and the kids went out to dinner, at a restaurant someplace in the neighborhood. And I swear, since I was a great ham eater, that I had a ham sandwich for dinner. So I think that's my funniest, probably my most endearing also.
That's adorable. The neighbors who brought the ham. I guess they didn't research. We didn't have Google in those days. We didn't have the Google machines. So.
Right. That's right. That's right. Or, they may have known. I mean, I don't know. Maybe back then people didn't really understand what kosher was if you were not Jewish or if you were not Muslim, who had the same dietary rules. So that was hilarious. I'm sorry. I didn't believe I couldn't think of that, before I was told about it. You have a funny one?
Well, I mean, there were a couple of funny ones. The funniest food I remember at Thanksgiving is that somehow in the 1950s and 60s, the goys of the world, the non-Jewish people of the world, made Jell-O molds part of their Thanksgiving meal. Now, there's nothing really wrong with Jell-O. I used to like red Jell-O with bananas in it. But somehow at Thanksgiving, it was like a green Jell-O mold and it had shredded celery and carrot in it. And I just remember that as rather disgusting. So I could never get behind the Jell-O molds. And I look at them now and I went, where were we as a culture that the green Jell-O molds with the carrots and the celery became like such a thing for the 1950s and 60s Thanksgiving? The other funny moment was the year that was fairly recently is that I finally admitted to myself and to my husband that I didn't really like turkey that much.
Oh, right. You told me, right.
Yeah, I didn't like turkey that much. Now, I like it in a soup. I like it in a marinara sauce. But just like, the idea of roasting a turkey, the only thing I love about roasted turkey is I love the smell of it.
Mm-hmm.
So that changed the whole face of our Thanksgiving, was just kind of admitting that I never really liked the turkey and that I had spent years and years and years trying to have a Rockwell kind of looking, Norman Rockwell, the famous painter who did these great paintings of bliss in the 1950s. I thought I should recreate that, but I finally got to a point somewhere in my 60s where I decided I didn't like turkey. I do my turkey soup and my pumpkin custard, and that is usually Thanksgiving dinner.
I love it. I love it. I want to get in our stories for the radio audience. Usually, we just cut off where our time ends. So I'm going to shorten my stories because I think we have about 4 or 5 minutes. I have a favorite. Nothing funny. Just a memory of a favorite. It was back in graduate school in Santa Barbara. We decided to have a Thanksgiving, which honestly, with my memory, I think is like the first Thanksgiving I actually do remember. And, it was early 70s, so there's a lot of drinking and smoking and, everybody was laughing and having a really, really great time. No family. So we had no family trauma. There was no trauma involved in the getting together. And you know what my memory was? After you're drinking, after you were smoking, and you were sitting back, I just remember us sitting back, listening to classical music, listening to some jazz. We were talking, I think, Nietzsche and Wagner, right? I think we had some Thelonious Monk on playing. And, when I think about it now, I'm just sitting there going, was that really pretentious? And I thought maybe just in today's world it is, but back then it was awfully sort of serious, and I think we had the luxury back then because we had no real world problems. We didn't have worries about work and family for the most part. And I think we were just able to purely enjoy ourselves and whether it was pretentious or not, our conversations I miss today.
Yeah.
So I think
I would agree.
that was a great one.
I would agree. It was a time of idealism,
Yeah.
so you had those idealistic kind of conversations, and we were all trying to be grown up. You don't realize how young you are in your 20s. So that's a good one. Do you want to finish up with one for our radio listeners?
Sure. Do you want to?
So
You pick what your.
How does Thanksgiving make us better people? So here's my answer to that. I think that Thanksgiving is an invitation to reflect upon the grace and the gratitude in life. It's also an invitation to reach out to others. That story that you just told about friends gathering and there was no family. I used to call those orphan Thanksgivings.
Right, yes.
And all my friends, they weren't going home or they didn't have family nearby or whatnot. And we would all gather and support and love each other over a common holiday with lots of food, lots of drink, and lots of good time. So Thanksgiving is an invitation to reach out to others. It's an invitation to welcome them, and it's an invitation to welcome ourselves home by reflecting upon the goodness and the grace in our lives.
That's beautiful. I sort of, I think, simplified it a bit. I just tell people just to remember it's not a religious holiday. It's not an ethnic holiday. It's not a partisan holiday. It's just a holiday to say thanks and be grateful for what we have. We still got a little time. Do you mind if I hit one? It's sort of, it's tragic and grateful. And I'll just do this really quick because I'd like to get it in the next minute, right? It was my dad's last Thanksgiving. But we knew it was the last one. He was 70 years old, exactly. And he had Parkinson's and ALS. And at that point, he had no ability to move or do anything. And we brought him to the table and the whole family played the role that it was just a normal Thanksgiving, yelling and screaming and laughing and all that and talking to him as if there was just nothing wrong. And it was funny. It was that moment that I thought, and this is the grateful part, that if memory serves me correct, I remember looking around and I almost could cry about how wonderful it was to have family for him. That was my tragic and grateful. So
let's end there, David. That's a beautiful story to end with.
I agree. So say goodbye, Stephanie.
Goodbye, Stephanie, and happy Thanksgiving, listeners.
Goodbye, David. I second that. Bye-bye now.
Thank you.